Hey there. Ready to dive into some really old philosophy? I mean, you're a philosopher, right? So
Yeah.
you're probably like me, fascinated by how ideas get started. The basic building blocks of thought. Well, today, we're going all the way back to ancient Greece, to the birth of atomic theory. But not just the physics, we're talking full-on philosophy here.
Exactly. It's a philosophical puzzle just as much as it is a scientific one.
Our main source is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Leucippus. And this guy, well, he's a total mystery. I mean, we're talking about a philosopher whose existence was debated in the 19th century. Like, did he even exist? Was he a student of Zeno of Elea, the guy with the crazy paradoxes about motion? And how much did he actually contribute to what we now call atomism?
It's a pretty big challenge trying to figure out someone's thoughts from such limited evidence.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Who was Leucippus, and what do we know about him?
Well, nailing down the specifics of his life is difficult. We know he was an ancient Greek philosopher, and he was around sometime in the 5th century BCE. But where he was born is a bit of a mystery. Some say Elea, some say Abdera, maybe Miletus. And to make things even trickier, almost all of his writings are lost.
So we're basically working with secondhand accounts then, just whispers from history.
Pretty much. We have to put his philosophy together from little pieces quoted by later philosophers, like Aristotle, for example. But we always have to remember that those later guys had their own agendas. They might have twisted Leucippus's ideas a bit to fit their own views.
Got it. So context is really important. What was the philosophical scene like back then? What ideas was Leucippus arguing against?
Well, imagine a world where people are saying change doesn't exist. That's the world Leucippus was in. A world heavily influenced by Parmenides, who said that change is an illusion, that true reality is unchanging and eternal.
Wait, so everything we see happening around us, like the seasons changing, plants growing, it's all just a trick?
That was Parmenides' a radical idea. He thought our senses deceive us, and that real reality is a single, unchanging being. It threw the whole philosophical world into chaos. How do you even argue against the idea that everything is an illusion?
Right. How do you even begin to tackle that? Seems like a philosophical dead end.
And that's where Leucippus steps in, with a really bold idea. What if reality is made of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms? And what if these atoms are always moving and rearranging themselves in an otherwise empty space?
Ah, so that's where the idea of the atom comes from. Tell me more about this atomism thing. How did it challenge Parmenides?
Well, Parmenides completely rejected the idea of nothingness, of empty space. Leucippus basically said, hold on, what if this nothingness is just as important as the somethingness? He called this nothingness the void, and he proposed that the void is crucial for atoms to move and interact. Without the void, everything would be a stuck, unchanging block, just like Parmenides thought.
Okay, so the void is like the stage where the atoms do their thing.
That's a good way to put it. The void is the space where the atoms move, bump into each other, and combine in tons of different ways. And all this movement and rearrangement, according to Leucippus, creates the world of appearances, the world of change and diversity that we see and experience.
So the atoms themselves don't change, but their arrangements do, and that creates the illusion of change on a bigger scale.
Exactly. It's a brilliant way to bring together the permanence of reality's basic building blocks with the ever-changing nature of what we experience. It's like, imagine a huge Lego set where the atoms are the bricks, and the void is the space where they can be rebuilt in endless ways.
This is a really cool challenge to Parmenides. But what about those atoms? What are they like, according to Leucippus?
He saw atoms as indivisible, eternal, and always in motion. They come in different shapes and sizes, and it's how these atoms combine and arrange themselves that makes up everything we see and touch.
Okay, I'm following you. But how did he explain how the universe itself formed? Where did all these atoms come from, and how did they start swirling around in the void?
That's where his idea of the cosmic whirl comes in. It might sound a little weird to us now, but it was a huge breakthrough back then.
I'm all ears. What is this cosmic whirl?
Picture a giant, chaotic cloud of atoms just swirling around in the void. As time goes on, similar atoms, because of some kind of natural attraction, start to cluster together. As this swirling mass gets bigger, heavier atoms are pulled towards the center, and the lighter ones are flung outwards.
Okay, I can see that. Kind of like a cosmic centrifuge.
Exactly. And this outward force creates a kind of membrane of atoms around the spinning mass. It's like a cosmic bubble.
A cosmic bubble. Now that's an image.
As this bubble spins, it creates friction and heat. And Leucippus thought this heat sets some of the atoms on fire, making them glow. And that's how stars are born.
Whoa, so stars are basically superheated atoms. That's amazing.
And it doesn't stop there. This cosmic whirl keeps spinning, throwing off smaller clumps of atoms that eventually form planets and other stuff.
So the entire universe, from the smallest atom to the biggest star, is all part of this massive, interconnected dance of matter and void.
That's the heart of Leucippus's vision. He saw the universe as a constantly changing system, driven by the eternal movement and interactions of atoms.
It's a pretty elegant and complete theory, especially considering how little we know about Leucippus himself.
Absolutely. And it brings up some really interesting philosophical questions, especially when we think about this one fragment that's attributed to him. It says, "Nothing happens in vain, but everything from logos and by necessity."
Okay, that's interesting. What does he mean by logos?
Now, that's where things get really fascinating. And we'll have to explore that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Oh, come on, you're leaving me hanging.
Mhm.
All right, listen, we're going to take a short break to let all this sink in, but make sure to come back for part 2, where we'll figure out what logos means, explore the philosophical implications of Leucippus's atomism, and tackle the tricky relationship between him and Democritus, the philosopher who often gets the credit for atomic theory. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Leucippus. Remember that fragment we were talking about? Nothing happens in vain, but everything from logos and by necessity.
Yeah, that logos thing really got me thinking. It seems like a big clue to understanding Leucippus's whole philosophy.
Right.
So, what is it exactly? Cosmic reason? Some kind of divine plan?
Well, like a lot of Leucippus's ideas, the meaning of logos is open to interpretation. It could be reason, account, even law. Some experts think Leucippus is suggesting there's a cosmic intelligence guiding everything. Others say he's just emphasizing the importance of natural laws.
So on one hand, you have a universe run by a big rational principle, and on the other, a universe working like a perfect machine, following predictable laws. Both are pretty cool ideas.
Exactly. And this ambiguity makes Leucippus so interesting. He gives us a way to understand the universe with Adrian and the void, but he also leaves room for us to think about the deeper, maybe even spiritual implications.
It's like he's inviting us to solve the puzzle with him, not just giving us the answer.
Exactly. And this brings us to another puzzle, the relationship between Leucippus and his student, Democritus.
Ah, yes, this student who often gets all the fame. How do we separate what each of them contributed to atomic theory?
It's a tough one, that's for sure. It's like we have bits and pieces of a conversation trying to hear two voices from thousands of years ago. Most sources agree that Democritus was Leucippus's student, but we don't know how much they worked together.
So was Democritus just repeating his teacher's ideas, or did he bring something new?
That's the big question, and there's no easy answer. But we can look for little differences in how they thought, clues that might show they had different views.
Okay, let's play detective then. What clues should we look for?
For example, some scholars say that both philosophers thought necessity was important in the universe, but Leucippus maybe left a little more room for chance.
Oh, interesting. So Democritus saw the universe as a perfectly predictable clock, but Leucippus might have thought there was a bit more randomness.
That's one way to see it. Remember that nothing happens in vain fragment. Some think that means Leucippus thought there was both logos, maybe a kind of overall reason or order and necessity, the rules governing how atoms move.
So maybe Leucippus saw the universe as a mix of order and randomness, where even random events are part of a bigger plan.
It's possible, and this could change how we think about free will and determinism even today. If even the random collisions of atoms are part of a meaningful pattern, then maybe our choices, even though they're influenced by things, still matter in how the universe unfolds.
That's a deep thought. But it still leaves us with the question, how much of what we say Democritus did, the father of atomism, should really be attributed to Leucippus?
It's a question we might never be able to answer for sure, but maybe that's okay. Maybe Leucippus's real legacy isn't about getting credit for specific ideas. Maybe it's about showing us how to ask the right questions, how to think outside the box, and how to be okay with the mystery and uncertainty that are part of life.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about having all the answers. It's about learning to live with the questions, to always be curious and explore and keep refining what we know about the world and ourselves.
Exactly. And speaking of exploring, let's move on to Democritus now. Let's see how he took those basic ideas of atomism and built them into a whole philosophical system.
Okay, let's dive into the mind of Democritus. What were some of his big ideas? And how did he influence Western thought? All right, so we've gotten to know Leucippus, that mysterious figure in ancient philosophy. Now let's talk about Democritus, the student who usually gets all the credit for atomic theory.
Right, but as we said, it's almost impossible to separate their ideas. What we can do is look at how Democritus took those atomic principles and really ran with them, applying them to some pretty amazing things.
So what did Democritus actually do with these atoms? Did he just use them to explain the physical world?
Not even close. Democritus wrote a lot, and even though we've lost most of it, the pieces we do have show us a thinker who applied atomism to pretty much everything: ethics, politics, music, cosmology, even how we perceive things, and the soul.
Hold on, atoms and the soul. That's a huge leap. How did he connect those?
He thought the soul, like everything else, is made of atoms, just a really fine and mobile kind. He said these soul atoms are spread throughout the body, allowing us to interact with our senses and experience things like thoughts and feelings.
So our inner world, our consciousness, is just atoms moving around.
That's the gist of it. He even had a theory about vision, saying that objects give off thin films of atoms called idola. These idolas go into our eyes and interact with our soul atoms, creating the sensation of sight.
Wow, that's incredibly close to how we understand vision today, with light waves hitting cells in our eyes. It's like he was intuitively getting at something that science would later prove.
Exactly, and that's what makes Democritus so cool. He might not have gotten all the details right, but he was working with a really important principle. Our subjective experiences come from material processes.
But that brings up some big philosophical questions, doesn't it? If everything, even the soul, is just atoms, is there any room for free will or morality?
Absolutely, and Democritus tackled these questions head on. He seems to have had a complicated, maybe even contradictory view.
Okay, break it down for me. What was his take on free will?
On one hand, he emphasized living a virtuous life, moderation, tranquility, being in harmony with nature. This suggests he believed in personal responsibility, that we can make choices that lead to a good life.
So it wasn't just, we're all just atoms, do whatever you want.
Definitely not. He valued ethical behavior and believed in striving for a fulfilling life. But then again, if everything comes down to the movement of atoms, how can we really be free in our choices?
It's that classic philosophical dilemma. How do we reconcile determinism with the feeling that we make free choices?
Honestly, it's not totally clear how Democritus himself resolved this. Some people say he was a determinist, meaning our actions are predetermined. Others say he might have found a way to fit free will into atomism. Maybe by saying our choices are influenced by atomic motions, but not completely set in stone.
It's another example of how Democritus's ideas still challenge us today, making us think about the nature of reality, the self, and the limits of what we can know.
Right. And even if we don't have all the answers, just grappling with these questions, wrestling with these philosophical dilemmas, makes this whole journey worthwhile.
It reminds us that philosophy isn't about finding one final answer. It's about constantly questioning, exploring, and refining what we understand about the world and ourselves.
Exactly. And with that, I think we've come full circle. We started with Leucippus, this mysterious figure who dared to challenge everyone with his idea of atoms and the void. Then we explored his student, Democritus, who took those ideas and built them into a complete philosophical system that covers everything from the nature of reality to the meaning of life.
And along the way, we encountered some of the biggest questions philosophers have been asking for centuries. What is change? What are the limits of what we can perceive? What's the relationship between mind and matter? Is there free will in a deterministic universe?
It shows how powerful these ancient ideas are. They still resonate with us today, spark debates, challenge our assumptions, and inspire us to keep searching for a deeper understanding.
So to everyone listening, if this deep dive into atomism got you thinking, keep exploring. Dig into the works of Leucippus and Democritus, wrestle with their ideas, and see what you discover. You might even stumble upon your own philosophical mystery.